was just fascinating. You know, it was the thing that would be on TV every night if it was today's cable-driven cycle.
A 100-year-old mystery thrusts Madison into the national spotlight, and the case kicks off our week-long Cold Case Wisconsin special. In 1911, a 7-year-old girl was murdered. Her body discovered days later in Lake Monona. Good evening, everyone. I'm Michelle Lee.
And I'm Eric Franke. 2 arrests would follow, but they divided the city then and still do now. In this Cold Case Wisconsin, News 3 Investigates Jennifer Hoff asks, who killed little Annie Lemberger?
Eric, all this time later, and there's still really no easy answer, but we look to Annie's nephew to help us unravel the case that he didn't even know about until more than 7 decades after the crime. Inside his book,
it's just a very, very good mystery.
Mark Lemberger brings readers back in time to a dark place in Madison history.
The Annie Lemberger mystery is the second most written of child homicide in 20th century America after the Lindbergh baby.
There's page 3.
The headlines captured people's attention all across the country.
There's the 7th.
Because in 1911, it wasn't often children were murdered. Historian Mark Gajewski.
You know, for this kind of child in Madison to get all this attention was really a pretty big deal.
It was Labor Day weekend of that year. Newspapers report little Annie Lemberger was kidnapped from her Francis Street family home, near where the Kohl Center is now. Days later, and a mile away, searchers found her body in Lake Monona near Brittingham Bay. She'd been suffocated. But as fast as news of that spread then, it wasn't until 1985 that it reached Mark Lemberger living in South Carolina.
This murder mystery in our family of many years gone by was front page in the Wisconsin State Journal that Sunday morning.
The little girl who stole America's hearts grabbed Mark's, too, because she was his aunt. After spending years scrutinizing the scandal, his book was born.
There were really only 2 possible suspects, and you could make a perfect case for the innocence of either one of them.
John Johnson was the town criminal, a convicted child molester and easy target. He confessed to the crime, but despite recanting, spent 10 years in prison before an attorney, anxious to gain public office, took on his case and during trial introduced a surprise witness that would stun everyone.
He basically bribed a woman to come forward and accuse Annie Lemberger's own father of the murder.
Immediately, Martin Lemberger was arrested and Johnson freed. It said in a fight to be first, the same newspapers that reported Annie's death failed to investigate May Sorens's claim Martin was the killer. The papers and people had to blame someone, and for no other reason jumped on the bandwagon and accused Martin of murder. Even years later, when a polygraph test proved Sorensen lied, the damage was done.
They certainly were not vindicated. Most of the town thought they were pretty evil for letting poor Mr. Johnson rot in prison for 10 years.
Martin didn't serve time behind bars. The statute of limitations expired, but rebuilding his reputation might just have taken as much of a toll on the family. Martin had a stroke and died some 30 years after Annie did. Soon after, his wife won a settlement with a magazine that called Martin a murderer. She used the money to buy a monument that memorializes a little girl that captured the nation's attention.
It was just such a great whodunit.
But any more answers about this Wisconsin cold case have long been buried with Annie Lemberger.
I asked my mother, did Grandpa do it? She said, do what? I said, kill little Annie. She said, no, he didn't kill her. I said, well, who did? She said, nobody knows.
Neighbor John Johnson was granted clemency and paid $5 grand as compensation for his sentence. He would die of pneumonia in 1938, while the attorney who helped free him was elected judge, but eventually disbarred for borrowing money from bootleggers in exchange for lighter sentences. So who killed Annie Lemberger? Mark there in the story encourages people to read his book and come up with an answer for themselves.
That is quite a story. Many, many years ago,
Many
Jennifer.
years ago.
Thank you very much for sharing that with us.